Well, hello and welcome back to Sum It Up. We're on episode 8, and today we're going to be talking about mindset, specifically the leadership mindset in both life and business. So, welcome to the show. I'm Joelle Martinez, President and CEO of the Latino Leadership Institute. And if there's one belief that has guided me through every season, not just in my leadership roles, but truly in my life, it's this. I believe that in this world, there's nothing but possibilities. And that just happened to be my senior quote. And it wasn't just a line in the yearbook, it was and still is, I think, a big part of my success story as a leader. Because I believe that growth is always available to us. But here's the thing, your mindset is either the gateway to that growth or it is the roadblock. And there's a difference between breaking through to success and missing opportunities. So, in today's episode, we're going to unpack what mindset really means and how it directly shapes your results in business, in leadership, and ultimately in life. You'll learn how to spot limiting beliefs that might keep you stuck, but we're also going to talk about how to reframe, especially as you navigate challenges and the chaotic world that we are all trying to navigate today. So, whether you are scaling a company, leading a team, or just trying to make it through the day, I believe that today's conversation is absolutely critical and essential. And there's no better person to talk about mindset with than my friend and my partner, Harry Hollins, because he is someone that always is getting us to think about the important role that mindset plays in our daily decisions. So, Harry, it's good to be back with you. And I just cannot wait to dive into this topic around mindset with you today.
No, likewise, what a critically important, not only topic, it kind of all starts here at any aspect of your life. So let's get into it.
Well, let's go. So, why do you say that? Why do you think that it all starts here? What is mindset to you? And particularly, how are you thinking about it, today?
Yeah, I think it's everything. I think it's how you feel, it's how you think, it's how you navigate situations in life, personally and professionally, and in a world that is complex and chaotic. And part of that is in how do you take kind of mental ownership of your own narrative. There's so much happening in the world. There's so much complexity in the world. And we're in a world where it'll start to define you for you. And that's probably, and that's something that you definitely don't want to do. So everything around how you navigate comes back to you and how you feel inside and how do you feel in your mind. And it's just, and that's why I always say it always kind of starts there. Doesn't matter if it's personal, doesn't matter if it's professional. But it's interesting, right? Because I was thinking about, I was looking forward to this podcast that we're having here. And I said, well, that's how I think about it. Then I started to Google and do research and go deep into it. And it's interesting because we talk about how important it is and everyone talks to it a little bit differently. People define it differently. And I know you have gone deep into this, much deeper than me, mindset, neuroscience, how the brain works. So I'd love to hear kind of how you think about it, how you define it, and what is it?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, this is so, it's so important and it's so personal. I think that's why I really have spent so much time around it. For me, mindset is the lens through which we see the world. But I think to your point, going back to the fact that sometimes we project instead of reflect, I think mindset is how we see ourselves. And we, set our limitations and our aspirations. And so I think mindset for me is how we interpret the challenges, how we respond to failure. But in the work that we've done at LLI for 11 years, it's also been the basis of how we pursue opportunity and how we pursue, reaching our summits. And, if you think about it this way, the World Economic Forum says that today's skills have a shelf life of 5 years because there's so much information technology disruption, the way we're training, the way we're thinking. And so to succeed as a leader, you've got to be in this space of wanting to change and wanting to grow. And now emotional intelligence and growth mindset, adaptability are in the top 5 skill sets that you need as leaders. So we used to think about these, kind of tactical skills, and now it's really about how we think and how we operate. So mindset for me is choosing curiosity over certainty, flexibility over fear, and really looking at possibility over problems. And when you are able to pull all of that together, that's where that unlocking what is possible becomes within reach.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I know, the problem sometimes I think we interact with around mindset is it becomes these buzzwords, or, it's someone writes an article, writes a book, puts on a podcast around mindset. And the one thing I don't want to do is just consider mindset as a buzzword. So talk through specifically how you see mindset really as a tool, in growth, but also in business. And then in particular, as we really define mindset for folks, what's the difference in your mind, especially for business leaders, between a fixed and a growth mindset?
It's interesting. And you talk about the kind of that fixed and the growth, and that fixed to me is almost like self-defining in its way. It's kind of is what it is, and you kind of stay there, and it's a little bit stagnant. And one of the challenges with that is, doesn't matter in personal and professional life, nothing is stagnant. It's always moving and it's always changing. And the fix to me is a challenging place to be, because it's just that you're fixing, you're stagnant, you're not moving, but the world is moving around you. Situations are changing. And that's where I kind of pivot over and think about growth. Because to me, growth is being able to change and pivot and take information and take situations and adapt to them, but all with a mindset of moving forward and progressing forward, however that may be, however you land it. But it's not stagnant. It's being on the move and hopefully always trying to move forward. And it's interesting when you said that about kind of this tool set for leadership. I think it is just that, it's a tool, but I also think we have to think about how you take care of it. Because it's such an important tool. How you invest in your mind, how you take care of your mind. And I don't know if we always think about the mind that way. If we get hurt or muscle hurts or we get sick, we take care of ourselves. I don't think we think about the most important tool being our mind and being really intentional around how we invest and take care of our mind, since that, is the center of everything. And in kind of thinking about that, Joe, I know there's a lot of different leadership mindsets. And this is where I go back to, I really want to keep kind of diving in with you because you've done this for so long. There's different mindsets. There's scarcity, abundance, reactive, intentional, fixed growth. What does all this mean to someone who says, well, great, I'm just trying to figure out, okay, I understand what mindset is. So many different types of mindset. Why does it even matter? And why do they break it down to that kind of discrete level?
I'm going to get real. And well, I know that doesn't surprise you, but particularly for our community, I'm a Latina leader, and there's so much there when I say that. And so these different mindsets are really critically important. I want to talk about scarcity mindset for a minute, because a scarcity mindset is rooted in fear. And fear, as we know, is the most powerful of all emotions. Fear can stop us in our tracks. And the notion of a scarcity mindset is really in someone that has it, they see the world as a zero-sum game. In other words, if you win, I lose. It's this idea of hoarding resources, resenting other successes, jealousy, all of this, that if they accomplish it, then it means there's nothing left for me. It's playing small in a big world. Whereas the abundance mindset, on the other hand, we see opportunity everywhere. We believe that there is enough room for everyone at the table and that there's opportunity in abundance. It's actually what creates the space for great collaboration. It's this notion that we rise together because we win together. And when you look at the world through that scarcity mindset, you're going to be constantly in a competitive mind frame. And I like being competitive. You and I both are competitive people by nature, but we're not competitive in the way that we just want to win and we want everyone to lose. You know, we're competitive in a way that if we work really hard, we can all achieve something great. And the outcomes of a scarcity versus abundance mindset are night and day. And the other thing you talked about is reactive versus intentional. And I think this is really important in a chaotic world, which, let's be real, we're living in that space. A reactive mindset is always in a defensive mode. So you're never on the offense, right? So how can you score a touchdown if you're always, well, I guess if you pick it and you go into the end zone, but in general, a reactive mindset is a defensive one. It responds based on emotion, urgency, and fear. So again, that fear emotion plays into it, and you're always playing catch up. You're never ahead, right? You're always going to be behind in the game, and that is not where you want to be. Whereas an intentional mindset, it's proactive, right? You're actually looking, you're forward thinking, you're motivated by things like purpose. And we know in the world that we're living in and in the challenges we have to face, we'd much rather be in that intentional, proactive versus reactive mindset. And for small business owners in particular, they're navigating challenges. That intentional mindset could be the difference between, you know, just surviving and thriving in my mind. But I don't know, like what resonates with you when you think about those things?
I think it's all of that. You know, as you were talking, I'm thinking about how, as we make this like really a real conversation, how do you develop your mindset? Where does it start? Where do you build on it from? And it made me think, and especially I want to piggyback on what you said about competition, because I think it's an important one. And I also think it's not only important for us, but, you know, I assume a lot of people listening, a lot of us are parents too, and we have young kids and we're trying to develop their mindset, right? And you're trying to develop earlier. And one thing you touched on, the competition, I think is really important. I think about, and I do it as a former athlete myself, is, and it's not the only way, but one thing great about athletics and competition is you have to deal with success, setback, and failure by definition, right? Doesn't matter if you're Serena Williams, LeBron James, Michael Jordan, doesn't matter. You have to deal with that. And you also have to deal with teamwork and working with others and leading and bringing things together. And so when you think about the leader of the team, whether it's the point guard or the CEO of a company, you're still trying to bring along everyone with the right kind of frame of mind. And it takes kind of navigating through that. And you know, one thing and piggyback question back to you made me think about was when we think about the great leaders and we say, man, they have great mindsets. I used to think that too, but you only saw the success and you didn't really understand or see how they became successful. And that path included a lot of setbacks and failures. And then as you listen to those we think are great leaders and have great mindsets, they talk about everything they learned from the setbacks to the point that the setbacks become actually an asset and not a negativity. It was, this didn't work, but here's what I learned from this so that I can move forward, maybe not make that same move or mistake again. And it'll help me be a better person. And I say all that to say, how did you kind of develop your mindset? Because it has to be a starting point. Everyone we talk about and we define it, we say it to everyone, but not only where did you start to develop it, how do you continue to work on it? And I didn't want to get personal and say, how do you develop it in your kids? Because I think it's important because it relates to all of us.
Yeah, I think this notion is so critically important for us to zero in on. And, you know, it goes back to this invisible backpack that so many of us wear around, and that I see in particular my daughter carrying around. And that's this notion of you got to be perfect and you can't fail, or this idea that you're carrying the weight of the world, and so you have to succeed. Even the feeling that I feel sometimes physically on my chest, that the decisions that I make are going to have a ripple effect for so many other people. And the weight of all of that is crushing, and that weight creates that fear, right? That fear of failure, but also the fear of success. And I think for me personally, on my own journey and for my kids, I'm really trying to focus in on that fear of success, because it's going to impede one's growth mindset. I have worked really hard to get over the fear of failure, because I know, like you, that, when I fail, it's an opportunity to learn. And that's really how I look at failure. It's an opportunity to take a different path. And when one door closes, another opens. But I think to have a real growth mindset and put it to use every day means that I got to address my fear of success. And that means that I have to be open to that abundance mindset. And sometimes that's really hard when the world is telling you that maybe you're overly ambitious, too visionary, too bold of a thinker. So they put these labels on you. And hearing that just adds more to that invisible backpack that can weigh us down. And so I'm a work in progress. I don't know, you have been in so many key decision-making roles, and, mindset has played a critical role. What about you? Like, where along the line in your journey has mindset played a pivotal role in something you've done?
It's been, it's always been there. And it's interesting, as you said, about this fear, because I think we always have it, whether we want to admit it or not. It's there at some level, and you have trepidation, you have doubt, and I think that's normal. One thing I think about, and I use a lot of sports analogies, and that, but I use them because I think, I think sports are so prevalent in our society, but those analogies are easily bridged over into the business world. And I think of, Rafael Nadal. We all know, the great tennis player, just retired. And I remember they asked him about, I don't know, won 21 Grand Slams. And he said, when I'm on the court, I don't think about winning and losing. He said, I think about the process, and I break down the individual moments as specific as, let me focus on hitting the correct forehand on the next shot, then the next backhand. Because his point was, each of those single moments is an inch of success. And I think of, like, Any Given Sunday with Al Pacino, right? In that great speech he gave at the end, where he said, forget everything else, just we have to claw for every inch, but every inch is moving forward. And so that's how I think about my fear, because I have it all the time. And whether we're giving a speech in front of a big crowd or we're giving a presentation, it's like, let's break this down. Let's just walk in the front door. Let's sit down. Let's get the presentation. Think about your first sentence, because I think the rest can be overwhelming, and fear is this massive thing. And one way I think about overcoming fear is to just think about the process, not the results, just the process. And can I break the process down into bits and pieces? And one thing that's great, and I'd love to get your perspective on it, when you do that, every time you accomplish a bit and piece, it's a success. And now you start stacking successes. But how do you think about it? And you speak you do keynotes in front of thousands and thousands of people, and you're an introvert. And I know that because I've worked with you for a really long time.
Yes, I am.
And you're spectacular up there. You look overly confident.
Yeah.
But I want to kind of get underneath it and say, what is that like?
Yeah, I think, listen, going back to my senior quote, in this world, there are nothing but possibilities. Just sit with that for a minute. In this world, there are nothing but possibilities. It is not, for some of us, that's a natural way of seeing the world. But not only am I an introvert, Harry, I'm also a realist. So I'm not an optimist by nature. And I take data, I take facts, I take all of these things in to navigate the world. And so to really step into that space where I can truly believe and embody that there are nothing but possibilities has been a journey. It means, to your point earlier, like, how do we actually treat our minds as our biggest, most important tool in success and in life. And that's why I have spent so much time learning about neuro leadership, teaching about neuro leadership, really helping unlock one's potential by looking and controlling our emotions, the way that we see the world, and most importantly, the way we see ourselves. I am an introvert who never liked to be the one to tell the story or talk in front of people. But I found my voice along the way because I knew I had something really important to tell. And part of that work was getting rid of some of the stuff in my invisible backpack, right? And letting go of some false narratives that we turn into facts that aren't facts. In fact, they're baseless, but we carry these things around with us. And that's such a limiting way of operating in the world and in life. And going back to my children, I tell them all the time that, I used to tell them when I dropped them off at school, and even today, like, just be curious today. Be open to possibilities, because that is a way of training our mind to not look at all the things we're not good at, but to really be curious about something. So to become a big public speaker, I had to get over my fears. I had to look at all of my strengths as a storyteller. And I really had to look at the world through a curious lens. And so when I go and I give these speeches, Harry, it's not what I have to say. It's the question and the answers and the dialogue. And I walk off those stages having learned more about the world, about individuals, and about myself. That is growth mindset. And I think one of the things that you and I share in common is our love for running. And part of running really that's part of really opening up our minds. So you're a runner, but tell me a little bit about how you practice growth mindset and how you nurture that growth mindset.
Yeah, so it's so crazy. You just brought up running. I know we're both runners, and actually that's gonna be part of kind of how I respond to your question. When people ask me why I run so much, and I run a lot. I run every day, run at 5 a.m. I run a ridiculous number of miles, but it's actually not the physical and the emotional positivity I get from that. That's an output that I get. The truth of the matter is I run at 5 a.m. because when I'm done running, I've started the day with a success.
Ooh, what does that mean?
And because I've already done something positive in life, and I've done it early. And I've always viewed it, when I end my run, I do it every morning. I head out at 5:30, back by 6:30. Before most people wake up, I've already done something positive. And I can always lean on that. And so regardless, so I step into the day with a positive mindset because I started my day off positive. So I always try to start positive and end on a positive note. What happens in between is kind of life. And let's just say everything in between didn't go my way or the way I wanted. I can still look back and say, yeah, but I still got to do this. I accomplished this in the morning. I accomplished this before I went to bed. And it starts to even it out. And so that you don't leave every day with this kind of negativity. And I bring that up on the same thing as you pivot over to the business world is how do you start the day, individual, as a team leader, on a positive note? Because that kind of sets the trend for everything else. And then even if things kind of go off the rails a little bit, you can still end the day and say, we had some challenges. We got to come back tomorrow. But don't forget, we did this. This was actually positive. And that's why I go back to when I quoted the thing about Rafael Nadal saying, I break it down into bits and pieces because within those bits and pieces, I'm going to have successes and I can point to those and that can kind of build momentum around it. So it's crazy that you brought up kind of running, and it's never been the physical for me. It's always been when I step into the office, when we meet as a team, I'm already saying, man, I've done something good today already.
Yeah. God, I need to rethink when I run because you know me, I tend to run later in the day, but I actually never thought of your running because you and I talk about, running often. I never thought you leveraged it as a way to start your day with positivity and accomplishment. And, that's really insightful. I actually didn't know that. And now I'm actually going to try to do some more morning running because I'm typically not a morning runner, but tell me, if you bookend your day, with success, growth mindset, end with, probably accomplishment, gratitude again, and that positivity, somewhere along the day, it goes off the rails and you are in the pressure cooker. How have you really dealt, or can you even give us an example of a really difficult decision, a moment where you saw yourself going down into the fixed mindset, hole there, and you got to pull yourself up? How do you do that though? If you start and bookend it with positivity, but you find yourself in a fixed mindset midday, how do you make the shift?
It's interesting. I think I've watched other great, leaders and executives and team leaders and kind of learned from them. But one thing that kind of guided me was, you have a day, and we'll take it in the business context. And sometimes it's just nothing's going the way you want it to go. No one's buying my products. No one's buying my services today. I come from the deal side. I can't close the transaction. I can't get the buyer and the seller to agree. I can't get the deal done. And you sit there and you can sit in that. What I've kind of learned in that is you have to kind of think about what you control. And you have to step back and say, well, okay, what do I control? And I do control how I engage, who I engage, what I make on the next step. And then one question I always ask myself, have I tried everything? And I think if you're really honest, a lot of times there's no way you can say that you've tried everything. So pick something you haven't tried, because that's a positive thing. And that's also a way that you can move forward. And then I go back to where I brought up that, great kind of perspective from Rafael Nadal about the process, what I can control. And then when I write down what I can control, what are the steps? And I don't care if it's just a small step. No one's buying my products and services today. Well, have I tried every prospective buyer? No, probably not. Can I come up with 5 and make 5 phone calls? Can I break it down? Because that's a movement forward. That's positive. That's a growth mindset. That's taking control as opposed to sitting in the setback and the failure and no one is trying it. And so I think it's this retooling of the mind. That's why I get to really discrete moments, because if you think about the overall goal, sometimes it's so big, it's so massive that you're like, that's miles off. And go back to you brought it, you as a runner, and when you're running 5K, 10K, half marathon, you're not thinking about the finish line. You're thinking about points along the way, and you build it up. Because if you think about, I'm running a marathon, I got to get to 26, like you're going to quit. Like that's too far. Forget that. Like, no, it's like, how do I get my first 5K, then the next 5K?
Yeah.
How do you break it down? And you have to do it. You've done it now for well over a decade leading LLI, and you've had different teams. You've had different individuals, even had different strategies, different business lines. Some have worked, some have not worked. How have you led that? How have you continued to keep people positive? And we're in a space, in the philanthropy space, that can get chaotic. And I only say that to say sometimes, for people that come from the nonprofit space, sometimes you don't get the answers and the responses in clarity. It just comes with our space. It just is. And that can even be frustrating. So how do you kind of take that and keep yourself and your team motivated and going?
So I am a bit of a blessing and a curse for anyone that works with me, anyone that encounters me, because I'm going to push. I'm going to push and I'm going to pull, and I'm going to want us to think bigger and do more. That is not just a saying, it's embodied. But the way that I shift through that and the way that I lead is I try to get people to see and stop using the "we can't." This isn't going to work, or it's too hard. It's too big. Oh God, that is like nails on a chalkboard, like too ambitious. Like, what does that even mean? Again, to your point, even something big could just be broken down, right? And you build the scaffolding to reach, the summit. But I really try to move people from "we can't" to "what if we could?" Because if we begin to your point, what if we could? Then we begin to see the steps that have to go into achieving that. And each step is a milestone, and each milestone is easier to conceive in our minds than the big goal, right? So, I can be big and ambitious and visionary, But part of that is, I don't want to hear we can't do it. I don't want to hear we can't raise $10 million. I don't want to hear that we can't, create something that is game. I don't want to hear that we can't create wealth in our community and grow businesses to 1 million. I don't want to hear it. I'm not hearing it. What I want to talk about is, what if we could? What would that look like? What do we need to do to contribute to make that happen? And then let's get to work. And if along the way we learn, because we're curious, that something we thought isn't going to work, then all we have to do is pivot, right? All we have to do is change a little bit, but we don't lose sight of the big ambition. To me, that's a growth mindset. And it's not blind optimism, right? This is about believing in something so much that you are willing to trust yourself and your teammates to get it done. Right. And that is growth mindset. That is what business leaders and leaders today really have to take into. And the final thing is, if you've heard nothing else today, there's a 3-letter word that I put at the end of everything that is challenging. And you know this, Harry, because I do it all the time, and I do it with my kids, and I correct my kids all the time. They'll be like, oh, I haven't done that, or I haven't been able to accomplish this, or I didn't raise the $10 million. Growth mindset. And when you are in it, all that means is you put a comma and you add the word yet. I haven't raised $10 million yet. I haven't broken 1 million in annual revenue yet. I haven't figured out how to build in this strategy yet. That right there is the number one sign that you are in a growth mindset. You haven't given up, right? You're taking Nadal's advice and you're going step by step, and you still see the vision and you're still working towards it. That 3-letter word yet is the sign that you are leading in a space of growth mindset.
Yeah, love that. Love that.
Yeah. So let's wrap.
Attest to it.
Yeah, let's wrap up, because this is like, there's so many nuggets here. And to be honestly, I'm checking myself, because maybe I've lost some of this, especially of late, because it's been a little bit hard to lead. And so these are reminders, right? Because we go back to a fixed mindset and we let fear. And so let's end today with just some tools in the moment and leading with the mindset. I'm going to give you 2. Harry's going to close us out with another one. And the first one I'm going to give you, other than ending everything with yet, that keeps you in that growth mindset. The second is really this 90-second rule. Anytime you're trying to make a decision, you're navigating a real challenge, or you feel that fear is creeping in to hold you and lock you down in your place like quicksand, I want you to take 90 seconds and just pause. Work through all the emotions that you're feeling. Don't respond in the moment. Even ask, like, I need a couple of seconds to really process this. Because what's going to happen is you're going to rewrite, this script of fear, and you're going to give yourselves the opportunity to step back into your growth mindset. And then the other thing I do, instead of, just closing the door, and this really came up as a soccer mom, is I used to tell people all the time, oh, I have to take my kids to practice. Oh, I have to drive them across town to the soccer game. And I began to realize that put me in a funk, and I just felt like I was in a fixed mindset. And then I realized that when I said I get to, it changed the way I think. So when you think about leadership or decisions, not like I have to make this tough decision, I get to make a really important decision that could have very positive outcomes. So this is the way that we can really set our mind in the right headspace. But you close us out today, Harry. What is the thing you do to keep that mindset, and what are your closing words for folks listening today?
Yeah, I think, and first of all, those are awesome ones. I'm actually making note as you're talking, but
you get to.
I think we talked about just. I think you have to build the muscle of success, and it has to be consistent. Mm-hmm. And I do go back to, and I think we overlook it because our personal lives are complex. Running businesses, running teams, it's very, very complex. But it still starts with you as the individual, and making something you do at the beginning of every day success and repeatable every day. So it does not matter how the day goes. At no point can you say, I didn't have moments of success that day, because it builds. day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, decade after decade. And it's amazing because from that starts to build this mindset of, well, wait a minute, I can never say I can't do anything. I've been doing something every day, and I don't want to make that too small because it can't be too small. Whatever it is, whether you meditate, whether you run, whether you read a book, just find what is a positive moment for you and make it repeatable. Because all the greatest leaders I've been around, the greatest CEOs, the greatest athletes I've been around are really repetitious in how they do it. They're almost boringly consistent, but in the most beautiful way. They're boringly consistent because they build it into the muscle. So that muscle, that mind is a muscle, is built for success because they're doing it, repeating over and over. And so that's why I would kind of close it out. And like we said, the mind is an asset. So take care of it, invest in it, and come up with kind of your game plan that it starts to develop kind of the success mindset, and you kind of define what that is. And then I think it bridges over into your rest of your personal and professional life.
No better words spoken. Thank you everyone for joining today in the discussion of mindset. Thank you for your comments, and we'll see you next time. Take care, everyone.
Take care. Bye.